Hi, I'm Chuck McQuarrie. This video is one part of the support materials intended to help you, as an administrator, plan and design your Microsoft Exchange messaging network. In order to tailor Microsoft Exchange to best meet the needs of your company, you'll want to have a good grasp of the product. And to ensure optimum system performance, you need to take the time to carefully plan your system. To help you do this, the video will initially take an overview of the product and then look more closely at the individual Microsoft Exchange components and the various issues involved in planning your messaging system. For more detailed information, the accompanying guides and online documentation are a valuable resource. This video has 5 parts. The first overviews the product and outlines the underlying concepts that define your Microsoft Exchange messaging organization. Next, we'll look at the Microsoft Exchange client and highlight the features you need to be aware of as an administrator. Part 3 is devoted to planning your overall messaging system. We'll outline the issues that you need to consider in order to correctly design your messaging network. We'll also cover key points on installing and implementing your Microsoft Exchange system and migrating users from current mail systems. Part 4, Administration, looks at the Microsoft Exchange Server Administrator Program, some of its features, and the activities involved in system administration. We'll conclude by asking some of the experts here at Microsoft to provide their insight into planning and design issues and give you examples of how other companies have successfully implemented Microsoft Exchange Server. Microsoft Exchange Server uses client-server architecture to provide network messaging and includes software for both client and server computers. Microsoft Exchange Server software runs only on a Windows NT server computer. It makes use of the Windows NT operating system and its underlying reliability, scalability, security, and administrative features. The Microsoft Exchange client provides the user with a consistent interface across different platforms. Microsoft Exchange Communication takes advantage of services provided by popular network operating systems, including Novell NetWare and Microsoft Net-based networks. The client software consists of a set of integrated components. The email component combines familiar send and receive messaging with group information sharing applications. The Microsoft Exchange client can handle many types of information. The Schedule Plus component provides tools for time management and personal calendaring, as well as groupware features that allow users to efficiently schedule meetings with other people in the organization. The Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer is an optional component. It can be installed on any Windows platform as a design environment to create custom forms. However, it isn't required for users to simply view or use forms. Forms can be standalone, like a purchasing requisition or expense report form, or they can be combined with public folders to create custom applications used to track customer information, facilitate discussions, or consolidate survey data. Programming expertise isn't required to build forms given the tools and template examples included. And by using Visual Basic, you can extend the functionality of forms. The server components required for a Microsoft Exchange messaging system can vary depending on your company's messaging requirements. However, they fall into 2 general areas. The core components are required by all servers. They provide services to store, address, and transfer messages. Optional components are available depending on the product edition you have. These provide connectivity with other messaging systems, advanced security features, and components to extend Microsoft Exchange features to current Microsoft Mail systems. Microsoft Exchange Server core components provide the main messaging services. The directory is a database of user addresses and system resources, and a service to manage the handling of directory information. The Information Store provides storage for all types of messaging information and maintains server-based user mail and folders to hold shared information. The main function of the Message Transfer Agent, or MTA, is to move messages throughout the system. Lastly, the System Attendant handles general system maintenance functions. Microsoft Exchange Server includes the Administrator program to enable you to configure and maintain your system. The Administrator program runs on either a Windows NT server or a workstation computer. That's a brief look at the individual components of Microsoft Exchange Server. We'll be covering them in greater depth later. But first, here's how they work together to form a messaging system. Your Microsoft Exchange messaging system can be as small as one server with multiple clients, or include many servers linked together. In a large organization, servers are grouped into logical server groupings called sites. This can simplify administration and help optimize system performance. Your entire collection of servers and sites is called an organization. A site is essentially a grouping of servers that communicate with each other over a local area network. The key point is that within a site, server communication relies on permanent, high-bandwidth network connections. Microsoft Exchange Server makes efficient use of messaging bandwidth, since it sends only one copy of a message between servers. And when updating a directory or public folder, only the changes are transmitted. Between sites, Microsoft Exchange Server can use low-bandwidth WAN links or non-permanent dial-up connections, which can allow administrators to schedule messaging traffic to off-peak hours. Optional server components provide connectivity to current Microsoft mail systems and to other messaging systems outside of the Microsoft Exchange organization. Whether yours is a small company or a large international corporation, the Administrator program enables you to set up, configure, and maintain your organization, sites, and servers. The Administrator program displays a graphical representation of your entire Microsoft Exchange organization. Using the Administrator program, you can manage any site that you can connect to over the network. Each component in the organization, such as a site, server, service, and mailbox, is represented as an object. Associated with each Microsoft Exchange Server object is a permissions list that defines which users and groups are permitted access to that resource. The permissions are usually assigned by the administrator. Providing security for Microsoft Exchange Server is simplified by defining all messaging resources as objects. This allows Windows NT Server to provide the underlying security structure that protects all resources in the system. Here's how. To be able to access anything under Windows NT Server, each user or messaging service must have an account. The user account database contains information about the user, including their name, password, and the user rights that control how they can use the computer. At logon, the Windows NT Server Domain Controller verifies a user's password against the user account database to authenticate the user and validate the user's logon request. Once successfully logged on, the user's account information is used when attempting to access a Microsoft Exchange object on the server. Windows NT Security compares the user account information to the object's permissions to allow or deny access to the object or resource. Microsoft Exchange Server's integrated architecture allows you to design a messaging system tailored to your specific messaging needs. To help you better understand how a Microsoft Exchange messaging system works, let's take a closer look at the server components. The directory is a database similar to a telephone book. It contains information on all of the users, resources, and services that make up the Microsoft Exchange organization. The directory can also include address information for people that are on outside systems. From the client, users view certain address information found in the directory. The Microsoft Exchange Address Book provides an easy way to address messages or to look up relevant information like user job title, telephone number, and manager. The Administrator program presents a more complete view of the directory. The directory database is used to display the structure of the entire Microsoft Exchange organization. You manage the organization by manipulating objects in the directory hierarchy. Most administrative changes are written into the directory of a specified Microsoft Exchange Server computer. When an administrator modifies the directory by adding or deleting users, the directory service automatically distributes the directory changes to all of the servers within the site. Between sites, directory changes are transferred via mail messages. This requires the administrator to configure a directory replication connector between the sites. From the Administrator program, one server in each site is designated as a directory replication bridgehead server. It requests directory updates from the other site, and only the changes are replicated to the other directory. The information store provides server-based storage for messages and is responsible for controlling access to this information. It typically has two databases to hold user mailboxes and public folders, but it can be configured to hold either one database or the other for dedicated use. From the client, a user views this information as a collection of folders. A folder can store messages and other information like documents, forms, images, or other folders. Mail in the private information store is only available to recipients of the message. The private information store maintains all messages sent from one person to another or to a group of people. The information store uses a single instance storage model, so when a message is sent to multiple users on the same Microsoft Exchange server, only one copy of the message is stored on the server. Recipients get a pointer to that single shared copy. The public information store contains public folders that hold messages intended for group information sharing. Public folders are created and designed by users with permission to do so. All servers in the site keep a complete list of the public folder hierarchy. The contents of a public folder may or may not actually reside on the server. When a client attempts to read a public folder that is not on their home server but is located in the site, the folder hierarchy is used to locate where the public folder resides. An administrator can replicate a copy of a public folder to other servers in the site, perhaps to balance the load on a popular folder. Any changes to the contents of a public folder will automatically be replicated within a site. To give users access to public folders in other sites in your organization, the administrator has two options. One way is to replicate the public folder to the other site. Public folder replication between sites is similar to directory replication. It is mail-based and only involves those messages that were changed. Another way to give users access to public folders in other sites is to configure a public folder property called affinity. By setting public folder affinity, an administrator defines the connection sequence that is used to access public folder replicas from other sites. Affinity provides administrative control over connection costs while providing user access to public folders. Users can also create offline copies of server-based folders, either their private mailbox folders or selected public folders. This gives users access to information while disconnected from the network. When the user reconnects to the server, the local copies and server folders can be synchronized to reflect changes made to either copy. The Message Transfer Agent, or MTA, moves messages throughout the Microsoft Exchange system or to foreign X400 systems. It is responsible for delivering all messages, except for those between mailboxes on the same server. The MTA has features to efficiently route messages between sites and to recipients outside of the system. It can also convert messages from one format to another if needed. The Exchange MTA is certified to meet the 1984 and 1988 X400 standard. Because of this, you can send and receive mail from any other fully compliant X400 system. The system attendant handles general maintenance-related services and supports various administrative operations, such as rebuilding routing tables, monitoring the messaging links between servers, and the status of services running on remote servers. We'll cover the optional components in later sections. Now that you've had a high-level view of Microsoft Exchange Server, let's take a closer look at the Microsoft Exchange Client. In this section, we'll look at some of the general features of the Microsoft Exchange Client, but mainly we'll focus on areas that are of specific importance to administrators, since some features may affect the way you plan your organization. Here's Quinn Curtis to give you an overview of these key client features.
Hi, what we're going to look at today is the Microsoft Exchange Client running against the Microsoft Exchange Server. We'll take a look at some of the familiar email capabilities of sending and receiving messages between users, as well as some of the groupware capabilities that come with the Microsoft Exchange Client. Also, we'll look at Microsoft Schedule Plus and the Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer, which is an end-user forms design environment that can be optionally installed depending on you, the administrator. We'll be looking at the Windows 95 client. There are other clients available for running against the Microsoft Exchange Server. Each takes advantage of some of the capabilities of its particular operating system, but the general functionality of the clients is pretty much the same. Let's take a look at the Windows 95 client. On the left panel here we have a series of places where I keep my information. I have my server mailbox where my email resides, and it actually sits on the Microsoft Exchange server. I've also got some personal folders which are located on my hard drive. They enable a mobile user, for example, to take some email or even some public folder information with them on the road when they travel. Additionally, as you can see, I have public folders. These are replicated throughout an organization and provide the groupware capabilities to the Microsoft Exchange client, and we'll take a look at those in a moment. Additionally, if users have questions with the Microsoft Exchange client, a great place that they can go is to the Microsoft Exchange help facility that we have. Here they can find answers on addressing messages, sending messages, and a variety of other different information, as well as use the finding facilities that will help them get to the information that they need. Let's go ahead and take a look at our server mailbox and our inbox and some of the information that we have here. As you can see in my inbox, I have a variety of different types of items. The most common that users will have is an email message. An email message is indicated by this yellow envelope. The bold messages are messages that I have not yet read, and the unbolded messages are ones that I have read. In addition to email messages, you'll see that I have some other interesting icons. For example, I have an icon indicating I've received an out-of-office message. I have Schedule Plus meeting requests, people who have declined Schedule Plus meetings, and great ways for indicating the importance of email messages. For example, a down arrow indicating low priority or a red exclamation point indicating high priority. Additionally, I have some custom forms in my inbox, and custom forms are forms that can be created typically by an end user using the Exchange Forms Designer and can be routed between users and are just a unique way of structuring some of the information that you might want to send around an organization. Finally, we have some email messages that you can see have indicated they've been digitally signed or digitally sealed. And digitally signing and sealing email messages is a capability of the Microsoft Exchange Server's advanced security system that you, the administrator, will set up and manage.
Public key encryption and digital signatures are optional features that provide advanced security, in addition to the overall Windows NT security. These features must be implemented by an administrator and require user involvement. There are several issues to keep in mind. The administrator must install the key management server component on one server in the organization that is designated to handle advanced security. Because this server is responsible for managing the security database that handles security keys and passwords, it should be in a secure location. The specific process for enabling advanced security is covered in the documentation. The important factor is that the initial process must be handled in a secure manner, especially when creating security tokens and distributing them to end users.
Now that we've seen the Microsoft Exchange email inbox, let's take a look at some of the groupware capabilities of Microsoft Exchange that are available through Microsoft Exchange public folders. Microsoft Exchange public folders can be replicated in a manner managed by you, the administrator. You can define when and where and over what links information is replicated throughout your organization. It's a great way for you, the administrator, to manage how users interact with and see information. Additionally, you as an administrator have the ability to define at a root level who can create public folders. Those people become owners of those public folders and in turn have the ability to define who can do what within the context of those folders. Let's take a look at an example just to show what I mean. You can see in my public folder hierarchy tree here, I have an accounting public folder, and you'll note that when we bring up the properties sheet, Quinn Curtis is defined as the owner of this folder. So the administrator of this Microsoft Exchange site has given me the ability to create public folders at a root level. I, in turn, created a series of subfolders, and within the context of those subfolders, I've defined different permissions for different users. For example, the consumer group would not be able to see into the desktop or the developer folders because that's a segmentation that I, as the owner, have decided that I want to impose. Additionally, as an administrator, you'll want to be aware that there are typically three types of applications users will create with Microsoft Exchange public folders. Certainly there's a wide variety of public folder applications that can be created, but most typically users will use public folders for discussion, reference, and tracking types of applications. Let's take a look at some of those. A typical discussion application is shown here in our Application Design Discussion folder. Our column headings are different. The person that built this particular discussion folder is able to manipulate the way users interact with and see the information available in the folder. What we can do here is expand all of these messages to take a look at a threaded conversation that has taken place concerning these various lead issues. And you'll see that the icons that are indicated here show that custom forms were used rather than standard posted notes. In addition to discussion public folder applications, we have reference types of applications. A good example of a reference application is our Getting Started guide. Here in our Getting Started guide, we've actually published some information for Microsoft Exchange and simply done it with the custom note. That is, there are no custom forms involved here. We've simply manipulated the interface to show an interesting way for users to get to information that they need. As you can see here in our standard posted note, we've actually added some rich text, and it certainly supports custom objects such as bitmaps and pictures. It's a great way for a user to find information or answer questions that they might have on Microsoft Exchange. In addition to reference applications, a slightly more complex application is a tracking application. In the scenario here, if I'm a salesperson on the road and I know I'm going to make an account call the next day or later today, I would want to look at and see the information on a particular company. In our contact tracking folder here, we've gathered some information on this particular organization. And as you can see, we've posted the information into the folder using different types of forms. One of the things you'll also note is that within the context of the folder, my Compose menu actually adjusts itself for the type of form that I may want to launch. For example, here at this particular level, I could launch a new company profile form. If I step down a level within the folder, I have a series of other forms that I could launch should I choose. In our contact tracking folder, in the discussion folder, and in our Getting Started guide, which is our reference application, each of those were built without programming by end users. Even the custom forms you saw in the contact tracking folder were built with the Exchange Forms Designer and therefore required no programming, and again were built by end users. Now that we've taken a look at some of the groupware capabilities of Microsoft Exchange and the infrastructure that's involved in sending email, let's take a look at the standard note and see how people send information throughout the organization. You can see I have a message from Charles Landau, and the little paper clip icon indicates that it has an attachment associated with it. Charles has sent us a spreadsheet with some interesting information on it, our marketing system requirements. What we might want to do here is actually edit this spreadsheet because it looks like Charles hasn't quite completed it. What we can do is, by double-clicking on the embedded spreadsheet, you'll see that the menu actually changes to that of Microsoft Excel, and sure enough, I can actually edit the spreadsheet just as I would within Microsoft Excel. So for example, if I want to tally this column, I simply hit the sum figure and the spreadsheet is complete. Once we're done with editing the spreadsheet, we just simply click outside of the spreadsheet and return back to the Microsoft Exchange environment. Now that we looked at Charles Landau's email message, let's go ahead and create one of our own. What I need to do is actually send a few people a quarterly report. And what I'll do is drag the quarterly report from the Windows 95 Explorer into my email message and place it there, and address my email message to a few people. Let's send it to Angela and Connie. And if I wish, I should probably CC myself because I'm interested in that. You'll note that it's a quick way for me to get to a particular person's name by simply typing in the letters. And I'll CC myself. What I'm looking at here is the Microsoft Exchange global address list. This global address list is defined by you, the administrator. In addition to the global address list, I can actually look at addresses in my personal address book, that is, addresses that I will use frequently and I decide to store locally on my machine rather than in a global address book where everyone else can see them. And these address lists can contain addresses from people both within and outside of your particular organization. And if I wish, I can actually view a user's properties and see what kind of information or exactly who the user is. Particularly in large organizations, this will be a valuable tool. As you can see, I have quite a bit of company information in here, my address information as well as my title. I have organizational information available as well, for example, who a person's manager is and their direct reports, some typical phone information, a list of the distribution lists that they're members of, and their Microsoft Exchange email addresses. You'll note that I have a Microsoft Mail, an SMTP, and an X400 address. So this is good. We'll click OK, and we'll send our message off. Now that we've sent our email, what would happen if some of those users we sent our email to were offline? Well, Microsoft Exchange through its offline folder synchronization feature, provides great support for mobile users. The folders that are automatically replicated through offline folder synchronization include my inbox, my deleted items folder, and my sent items folder. Additionally, you can see through this custom icon that looks like a little briefcase that I have designated some other of my email folders to be synchronized locally. My Newswire folder, for example, is one I have chosen to synchronize locally. In addition to having email synchronization, Microsoft Exchange supports the ability to synchronize changes to public folders. A typical scenario might be if I'm a traveling salesman and I'm going to make an account call tomorrow, I would want to look at the contact tracking folder and want to make sure that before I make my account call I have the latest version. So what I would do is with my laptop, hook up to the corporate net, log into the Exchange server, and synchronize this particular folder so that when I do call in this particular account, I'll be up to date on all the open issues that they need to talk to me about. So as you can see, Microsoft Exchange provides a great platform for your mobile users to both stay connected when they need to be, and when they're disconnected from the network, still enable them to be productive. They can interact with both email and public folder information, and once they reconnect to your corporate network, synchronize with the Microsoft Exchange server and email and public folder systems to bring themselves and other users on the network up to date. One of the new features in Microsoft Exchange is the ability to recognize inline URLs that point to sites on the Internet. For example, if I open up this Library News Service email message, you can see that I have two areas marked in blue. This lower area marked in blue is actually an Internet site. This upper area is actually an intranet site, that is, it's on my corporate network. If I click on this particular item, you can see that I launched the Internet Explorer, and here we are at the press release. If I want to compose a message like this, I simply go to the Compose menu, create a new message. We'll send this to John Fredrickson. And I'll CC myself. And what I want him to do, if I could type, is check out this particular Internet site that I found. So we'll send this off to John. And we can see that my message has arrived. We'll take a look at it. And this is what John would see as well. You can see that he actually would see the Internet or intranet site here. He could click on that and go to the particular site. Now let's take a look at the Microsoft Exchange client's scheduling capabilities. Here we are in Microsoft Schedule Plus. You can see that the user interface is something that I as a user can manipulate fairly easily. I can have a to-do list visible, a calendar, as well as my scheduling information. And if I want to change the view of number of days that I have, it's a simple click away. I also have access to a weekly view, a monthly view with all my appointments, a planner, a to-do list, and a contact list. Additionally, one of the great features of Schedule Plus is the ability to view a second time zone. The time zone that we've defined here is that for Tokyo.
Microsoft Exchange Client is available in many languages. However, the server must have the correct code pages installed to support different language clients. When you conduct your survey of users, you should consider the foreign language support your users need so that correct code pages can be installed.
Typically in Schedule Plus, one of the things that people will use it for is group scheduling, and they'll use the Make Meeting wizard to do that. Here, organizing the meeting, I can select the attendees that I think are required and define a location. Let's go ahead and invite John Fredrickson to our meeting and make him a required attendee. And we'll click OK. You'll see actually that I'm looking here at the global address list when I do select people. I can define a duration for the meeting. In this case, it would be 1 hour. And Schedule Plus is actually smart enough to schedule travel time to and from meetings. I can pick a day on which I want to have the meeting. Let's go ahead and pick it for Wednesday. And what I see here is actually the free and busy times for both myself, which are indicated in blue, and for John Fredrickson, which are indicated in gray. If I want to see, for example, what John is doing during this particular time frame, I right mouse click, and I can see John Fredrickson as the person who's busy. And I can actually see what John is actually doing from this during this particular time period. This is particularly handy if I have multiple people who I want to see attend this particular meeting. Well, let's go ahead and schedule a time from 12 to 1, and we're done. Schedule plus next launches a message, and I can define where and when and a subject for this particular meeting. Off it goes to John, and sure enough, here's our meeting that's been scheduled. One of the other key features of Microsoft Schedule Plus is the ability to store that free and busy information in a hidden public folder. Hidden public folders for Schedule Plus are just like any other public folder in Microsoft Exchange and can be administered using the same tools in the Microsoft Exchange Administrator. In other words, you, the administrator, have the ability to define where and when people's free and busy information gets replicated in Microsoft Exchange. As you recall, the Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer is a forms design environment for end users. That is, people don't need to be able to understand programming languages or macro languages in order to create and build a form. We'll actually try to bring together a lot of the pieces of what we've seen today, permissions and folder registries and public folder applications, to show you how a user might use the Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer to build a public folder application. If you recall, we took a look earlier at a discussion public folder. Here's a discussion and response public folder that actually shows some custom forms associated with the folder. In this public folder application, you can see we have threaded conversations, each of which began with a lead thought form, which we'll take a look at here very briefly. These lead thought forms, as well as the response forms, were all created with the Exchange Forms Designer. You can see they support pictures, drop-down list boxes, and inherit some properties from the lead thread. Additionally, you'll note with these list down boxes are listed a series of topics so that the person who built this application can actually structure the topics and the subtopics around which the discussion revolves. This particular application isn't particularly valuable for us if we want to do a business application, so let's actually create a discussion and response folder based on this one and actually revise the forms. What we'll do is go to the public folder tree, create a new folder, and this one we'll talk about Exchange features, and we'll have a discussion about Exchange features using the form that you just saw, and we'll adapt it to our particular needs. Here we are in an Exchange features folder that we've created. You'll note, of course, nothing is published, and our views are very much the same as they would be in our inbox. What a user would do, in fact an end user would do, to create an application is simply go to Application Design and Copy Folder Design. Select the public folder design that they wish to copy. The one we want to copy is our discussion and response folder. The user, if they're an owner of the discussion and response folder, can copy permissions and rules, and any user can copy the description or forms and views if they have access to that particular folder. We'll click OK. It's going to tell us we'll overwrite the existing properties. That's fine. And the information will be copied to our new Exchange Features folder. Let's take a look at the Compose menu, and sure enough, we have a new lead thought form associated with our Exchange Features folder. Now, the lead thought form is the same lead thought form that was in the Discussion and Response folder, and that's not too valuable for us in our particular context here. So what we'll go ahead and do is go to the Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer and alter that form. Now, we're skipping through some of the steps that you might have to do to actually fully complete a form, but they are fairly simple. Let me talk a little bit about what you see. Here's the form that we'll actually redesign. Up here we have our typical toolbar menu, the toolbar buttons of which are very similar to those in Microsoft Exchange Client as well as the Microsoft Office 95 applications. What we have here is a series of controls that the user can place on their form if they wish. Let's go ahead and edit our form. What we'll do is double click on our topic and actually change those topics to something that might be a little more useful for a user. What we would probably want to replace these with are things like, if we're talking about Microsoft Exchange features, we might want to talk about performance, usability, and maybe customizability. And a user, if they wished, could simply click on a control and add it to their form, do a little in-place editing. Maybe we want to know what department people are in. And again, we'll double click on here. And because we do want to see this particular field in a column in Microsoft Exchange, department, we'll go ahead and add that as a value for the column name. There are other changes that we could do for this particular form, but let's go ahead and install the form. The first thing we'll do is actually save the changes we've made. That's fine. After saving the eForm project, the Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer actually generates Visual Basic source code for the form that you've designed. That it takes that form that you've designed and generates the Visual Basic source code that's behind that. The Visual Basic source code can then be modified if you so choose, or if you wish to have some of your developers modify that source code. Additionally, once it's generated the Visual Basic source code, then Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer actually installs the form in one of the libraries of a public folder or your organization form library. This is the dialog where we do that particular action. We can install it in the personal form library, in the organization forms library, or in one of the public folder libraries. And of course, what we want to do is install it in our Exchange Features folder that we created. We'll click OK. We'll have a dialog come up with the form properties on it. They look fine from here. Click OK again. We're going to replace the existing form. Now let's take a look in our Exchange Features folder just to make sure that we actually do have the new version of our lead thought form. We'll go ahead and launch the form. And sure enough, the dialog that we selected is available here. Additionally, in our view, we can actually take a look at the columns that are available. And if you recall, we added a column for department. That is, we wanted to be able to group and sort and filter on the department. And let's go ahead and see if it's there. And sure enough, there it is. We could actually add it to a view. Let's move it down a couple. We'll click OK. And sure enough, we've managed to change our view. As you can see, Microsoft Exchange is a great platform for building workgroup applications for both end users and custom developers. Custom developers can take that Visual Basic source code, and if you need to add customized functionality, perhaps an additional control or do some data lookups or something like that, your custom developers can take that source code, recompile it, reinstall the forms using much the same process as we have walked through, and you have a new form associated with a custom application.
Now that you've seen some of the user features of the Microsoft Exchange client, let's look at the administrative options that you have for managing the client installation process.
First, each Microsoft Exchange mailbox requires a Windows NT account. Now that can be created at the time the Microsoft Exchange mailbox account is created, and can be done in batch mode if you choose to do that. Additionally, typically when you install client software, you'll use a net share for that, although you can also use installation points for CD-ROMs and floppies. Also, one of the things that's very important to remember is that if you've installed the Windows 95 Exchange inbox, you'll also need to upgrade those clients with the Windows 95 Microsoft Exchange client. That adds some key features such as support for public folders, grouping and sorting and filtering and views and things like that. Now let's take a look at some of the tools that you as an administrator will use to make it easy for people to set up Microsoft Exchange within your organization. The first tool we'll look at is the Setup Editor. This is the Microsoft Exchange Setup Editor. It ships as a component of the administrative module for Microsoft Exchange. What you'll do first is select a client installation point. That typically, again, will be a share within your organization. The next step you'll want to do is modify your setup program options. The setup program options include defining some of the installation features that users will see during setup. For example, do they have a custom setup option? Do you want to give them a laptop setup option? You can define the components that they have access to, for example, Microsoft Exchange itself, Schedule Plus, and even the Exchange Forms Designer. Additionally, you can define which services they should have available, and so on. Additionally, you can define the user options that might be a default for most of your clients. For example, when a new item arrives, you may want to play a sound. You can define read options, send options, spelling options, and define their home server from here as well. The other concept that you'll need to be familiar with is the concept of user profiles. And user profiles can be defined by the end user and determine which services of Microsoft Exchange are available to the user. For example, public folder access, personal folders, and a personal address book are all examples of services that a user may or may not decide to take advantage of in their user profile. To make it easy for you to handle all of the profiles within your organization, especially when they're created, we provide an automatic profile generator which automates much of that process. As we've seen today, Microsoft Exchange provides a great platform for email and groupware functionality. The Microsoft Exchange client also includes Schedule Plus, the Microsoft Exchange Forms Designer, which is a forms designer for end users, and typically users will build three or four types of applications on Microsoft Exchange, including discussion, reference, tracking, and routing applications. Microsoft Exchange is a platform that supports mobile users as well with its synchronization of offline folders feature. Microsoft Exchange is a platform that we think will be a great infrastructure for you and your organization, and we hope you have fun using it.
There's a saying in business that nobody plans to fail, they just fail to plan. To successfully implement a Microsoft Exchange system, thorough preparation is crucial. A poorly planned system might not operate as effectively as it could, and may be difficult to manage or expand in the future. However, a well-planned Microsoft Exchange system can provide the right messaging infrastructure to fit your current messaging needs and easily accommodate future growth. The Planning and Concepts Guide covers specific planning issues in detail to help facilitate your design process. Design involves determining the best configuration for your Microsoft Exchange system. For a large enterprise, you'll need to determine how many sites to have, where their boundaries will be, and how to best use the network connections you have in place. Both large and small organizations will also need to decide how many servers to have and what each server's role will be within a site. Fundamentally, the messaging needs of your user base should drive your design process. The more you know about the types of information users generate and exchange, the easier it will be to design a system to meet their requirements. Initially, you'll need information about your current messaging patterns and usage. Depending on your system, your collection methods will vary. For instance, information might be gathered by looking at the typical message flow and volume of your system, or by surveying user mailboxes over a period of time. Also consider user demand for Exchange-specific features like group scheduling, public folders, and access to services like the Internet. It may be useful to create a matrix that maps each Microsoft Exchange feature to the percentage of users that need it. Once you've identified user needs, the next step is to look at your current network. Here's Mark Adcock with some recommendations.
The most effective way to plan your messaging system is to use the top-down approach. Start with the largest unit, the organization, and take a big picture view of your messaging needs. Then focus on the structure of the individual sites, and finally the individual server needs. The main factors when determining site boundaries are RPC connectivity that's permanent, available network bandwidth, and finally, all servers within a site must be running under the same Windows NT security context. At this stage, understanding your underlying network topology is very important since it forms the basis for determining your site boundaries. Your network topology can also affect things such as how you implement message routing, directory replication, as well as system administration. You should begin by mapping out your current network topology. Here, for example, is a network topology of a fictitious company. For your company, you'll want to note the type of connections you have and their bandwidth. Keep in mind the most important factor in determining if a server can be in a site is the net available bandwidth between the two servers. Many things can affect the net available bandwidth: data and message transmission size and volume, and network traffic patterns. All applications that use the connection should be considered. For example, one company may find that a 56K line suits their needs. Their message traffic and their public folder utilization is fairly light. Another company, however, with the same number of employees may find that they need a higher speed link to manage their heavier use of public folders and messaging. So for each network connection, determine the data transmission capacity that's available by subtracting the bandwidth that is used up by other applications that share that connection. In addition to bandwidth, other factors that you'll need to balance include the availability and the reliability of each connection and their relative cost. Public folder usage and directory replication can also affect your available bandwidth. You may also want to consider your future messaging needs, such as adding additional sites or planning for an increase in the volume of messages between your servers. As you continue to develop your plan, you may want to assess using your current network topology versus the impact of redesigning it. Once you have a good picture of how your network is structured and its bandwidth restrictions, then you can start to lay out your Microsoft Exchange organization.
First, you need to identify where your site boundaries can be drawn. Then you can determine the number and locations of your sites. Based on your network topology and bandwidth resources, you can determine logical boundaries for your sites. As a rule, try to keep the number of sites to a minimum by making each site as large as is feasible. This will simplify configuration and help ease administration. Create new sites only when it is warranted because of network traffic, the geographic topology, type of network links, availability of network bandwidth, or administrative considerations. To fine-tune your boundaries, consider how messaging will be handled within your organization.
Obviously, servers and clients need to be able to communicate. Most client communication is with their home server. They connect to the information store to check their mailbox, send messages, or access the public folder hierarchy. To access specific public folders or replicas, the client may communicate with the home server, other servers in the site, or to servers in other sites if you have public folder affinity configured. Plus, there are other types of communication between client and server for schedule information or delegate access. And servers need to connect to other servers for messaging and to replicate public folder and directory information. In order for two computers to communicate with each other, they must be running a common protocol. This is particularly important to enable clients to access public folders or scheduling information from servers on other LAN segments in the site.
For example, the way public folder access is handled can influence how you segment your network topology. Here's Eric Lockard to talk about the issues and trade-offs that come into play.
One thing to be aware of when doing your site planning is that if you do have multiple replicas of a folder within a site, the system will treat each of those replicas as equal for the purposes of load balancing the users that need to access that folder within that site. And so if you have a site that spans different qualities of network connectivity, if you have a slower link embedded in the middle of that site, you need to be aware that the situation exists where a client at one side of that slow link may actually access a replica of a folder across that slow link, even though the data for that folder resides at the same location as the user. The system doesn't have the capability to understand underlying network topologies within a site. So you may need to consider making those two locations two separate sites and using site affinity to better balance your users accessing multiple replicas of public folders.
So, there are cases where you may wish to split a logical site in two and configure public folder affinity between the segments to control which path a group of users take to access a particular public folder. The way messaging is handled can also influence your site decision. For example, say you have multiple servers in two locations, the US and Europe. You have two options: make them two sites, or include them all in one site. Let's look at the differences.
If the locations are within the same site, a message from a U.S. server addressed to people on 3 different servers in Europe goes over the network 3 times. So the bandwidth in a site should be high enough for this. If the locations are 2 separate sites, the same message would travel once between the sites as a single instance of the message and then be distributed within the site.
And so, determining your site boundaries really depends on your network topology balanced against factors that push your sites to be larger, like ease of administration, routing, and other considerations, and factors that push for more smaller sites. This is a good point in your planning to think about choosing names for the various parts of your Microsoft Exchange server organization.
Keep in mind, while the display names can be changed, the directory names for the organization, the site, and the server names can't be changed without reinstalling the software. You should choose unique names for each object you create. Try to select names that aren't likely to change in the future. Naming conventions can be based on anything from organization to building location to job function. When you create a new mailbox in Microsoft Exchange, the server will automatically create a foreign email address for any systems that you have outside of Exchange, such as SMTP or X400. This allows that user to be known by that address without any user intervention.
An important factor to consider when creating a site is the Windows NT domain model that you select.
Microsoft Exchange Server utilizes the Windows NT security infrastructure for authentication and access control, both for clients accessing servers and servers accessing other servers. And although you may have 50 or 60 different Windows NT security domains throughout a particular location, Microsoft Exchange Server really only cares about two of them, the domain in which the servers reside and the domain in which the client network accounts reside.
Microsoft Exchange servers use a Windows NT service account to authenticate each other when they are communicating. So the Microsoft Exchange server that you are connecting to must be in the same domain as the service account, or have a trust relationship with the domain that has the service account. The same thing is true for user accounts. A Microsoft Exchange client connecting to the server needs to present credentials that belong to an NT domain that is either the same domain as the user account or one that the server trusts.
If you don't have a Microsoft Windows NT domain structure in place, then you should probably just focus on your Microsoft Exchange Server site topology, and your Windows NT domain topology will follow.
Consult the Windows NT documentation to determine the best model for your needs. The Microsoft Exchange Concepts and Planning Guide also outlines the various options for mapping sites to domain models. At this point, your plan should have a representation of the topology for your Microsoft Exchange organization, including the number of sites, their boundaries, and the organization's relationship to the Windows NT domain structure. For organizations with multiple sites, the next step will involve determining how to connect your sites. The type of connectors you choose and where you locate each connector will have an influence on how messages are transferred between sites and affect the replication of public folders and directory information. Let's look at your basic connector options and how messages are transferred between sites.
Communication between sites is handled by the MTA as mail messages. The MTA can communicate over many different network transport protocols. The MTA uses configuration information held in the various connectors you have installed to determine which protocol to send mail over. The site connector can be used if you have LAN or WAN connectivity. If you only have dial-up connectivity, use the Dynamic RAS Remote Access Service connector. Use the Internet Mail connector if you have permanent connection to the Internet. And lastly, the X400 connector uses X400 transport protocols. The site connector is the preferred method for connecting sites. It has the advantage of being the fastest, most efficient connection method, and it uses LAN connectivity between the sites. It's also the easiest connector to administer, set up, and maintain. You can specify one server, the bridgehead server, to handle all intra-site messaging traffic. Or you can specify one or more servers in the remote site for an MTA to transfer messages to. This provides redundant routes for message transfer. Since the site connector assumes LAN connectivity, there is no need to specify message size limits or set message transmission schedules. If you don't have network connectivity, you can use the Dynamic RAS connector. It connects two sites over a dial-up connection using Windows NT Remote Access Service. The administrator can control when the dial-up connection to the other site is made. Two other connectors, the Internet Mail connector and the X400 connector, can be used to connect sites as well as connect to systems outside of your Microsoft Exchange Server system. If you have permanent connection to the Internet, you can use the Internet Mail connector to connect Microsoft Exchange Server sites. Or you can use the IMC to connect to systems that support SMTP. The X400 connector is generally used to connect to other X400 messaging systems. You can also use it to connect Microsoft Exchange sites through an X400 backbone. The X400 connector conforms to the 1984 and 88 X400 recommendations to provide maximum interoperability with other systems. Using the X400 connector to connect sites, you specify a messaging bridgehead server in each site to handle the transfer of mail between the sites. The X400 connector lets you schedule message transfer over the link and allows you to restrict message size and who can send mail through the connector. Because these options and others give you added flexibility, the X400 connector is more complex to set up than the site connector. Multiple connectors can be installed between two sites to provide alternate routes and load balancing. X400 and RAS connectors also enable the administrator to schedule when connections are activated. Each connector has a cost associated with it. These are assigned by the administrator. The MTA uses this cost information and the activation schedule to determine which connector to use. The lowest cost route is used first, but if that isn't available, the next lowest cost route is used. The Microsoft Mail connector is used to connect Microsoft Exchange Server with Microsoft Mail for PC networks or Star9 Mail, formerly known as Microsoft Mail, for AppleTalk networks. The MS Mail connector allows Microsoft Exchange users to take advantage of existing Mail for PC Networks 3.0 version or greater gateways. The Directory Synchronization Service is an optional component used to transfer directory address information between Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft Mail, and other messaging systems using the Directory Synchronization Protocol. The Directory Synchronization connector can function as either or both the DirSync server or DirSync requester to update the address list. Any Microsoft Exchange server in a site can have a connector on it. Servers can also run multiple connectors. Based on the type of connector and its anticipated usage, you'll need to decide where to place it. In addition to the connectors included with Microsoft Exchange Server, many third-party gateways are available. A Gateway Developers Kit is available to help developers create gateways.
Once you have structured your organization, decided on your sites, their boundaries, and how to connect them, then you can plan each individual site in more detail. Site planning involves determining how many servers you'll need, where to locate them in the site, and what users and services will be on each server. A good place to start is to look at the messaging needs of your users.
One thing to consider is that users vary widely in their usage levels in the system, from very light users who seldom use messaging or public folders to very heavy users that may spend most of their day utilizing the system and placing most of the load on your servers. You may also wish to consider grouping users who send each other mail a lot in their work group or department together on the same server to take advantage of efficiencies there. And you may also want to consider using servers for specific roles within your sites.
Each Microsoft Exchange Server computer runs a common set of core services which handle things such as message transfer. Server computers can also run additional software or perform specialized services. For example, servers can run the administrator program software, provide client installation SharePoints, or handle advanced security functions. You can have dedicated servers to handle public folders, Schedule Plus free busy information, or traffic from connectors and gateways. A Windows NT server can also perform other tasks, such as being a domain controller or remote access server.
Certain aspects of your Microsoft Exchange system should probably be distributed across multiple servers. You may consider having dedicated file servers for your client installation points during your rollout period. You may also want to consider looking for very popular public folders and creating multiple replicas on multiple servers to distribute the load across multiple servers. Additionally, the load on your domain controllers will be high during periods of client logon time, say early in the morning where everybody comes in and starts up their messaging client. You may consider dedicated machines for your domain controllers in very large sites.
The next step in planning is deciding how many servers you need for each site.
Once you've characterized your users and made a determination of the total amount of server system resources that you'll need to consider what type of server hardware you'll want to use. You have this choice of a larger number of less expensive server machines or a smaller number of very expensive machines or something in the middle. And there's pros and cons to each. If you have a smaller number of servers, You'll get more users on each one of those more powerful servers, and you'll get some benefit from having users in the same workgroup or department sending mail to each other if they're on the same server. That'll give you benefits with respect to reduced network traffic, reduced traffic between servers, and more efficiency for those users interacting on the same server. Conversely, though, if you have a smaller number of larger servers, although you'll have fewer servers to back up, each of those backups will take a little longer because you have more users, messages, and personal information stored in a single database.
This is a good point to note that many factors will influence your decisions. It may not be possible to follow all guidelines at the same time because some variables are at odds with others. You need to find the balance that is best for your particular situation.
Once you've determined the number of servers you'll need, and you do go to make a hardware purchase decision, you'll want to ensure that you get equal, balanced amounts of the critical hardware resources in those machines. You want to balance out the number and speed of your CPUs with the amount of physical memory and the disk I/O capacity of your I/O subsystem. You should consider things like caching controllers or disk stripe sets to make sure that you have an equally balanced hardware platform. You should also ensure that and plan that you have sufficient disk space for the storage capacity needs of your users and for your public folder applications. This will depend to a large extent upon the quotas for the amount of storage that you give your users and things like expiry time on your public folders.
Your site planning may also involve evaluating the needs of remote clients and mobile users. This includes making hardware and software decisions, as well as considering security and building in flexibility for future growth. Remote networking features are built into all Microsoft Exchange clients. Remote users can either establish a continuous remote connection to the server or work offline and connect only when they want to send new messages or check their mailbox. Planning also involves making decisions on hardware and software, such as remote access software, modems, ISDN, or X25 lines. The method used for remote connection to a server will depend on the operating system the client is using.
A Windows NT client uses the Remote Access Service, or RAS, built into the Windows NT operating system. Windows 95 uses similar dial-up networking to connect up to the Microsoft Exchange server. Depending on your remote access needs, you can have the same computer be a Microsoft Exchange server and a RAS server, or you can install a dedicated Windows NT RAS server. Windows 3.1, Windows for Workgroups, and MS-DOS clients use Shiva Remote software, which is included on the Exchange Server CD. Shiva Remote supports IPX, TCP/IP, and NetBEUI.
Design is an iterative process, whether it's for a small organization or a large enterprise. We recommend that you design a small-scale prototype topology to test out your design. Check your design decisions against current data, projected loads, error rates, and message traffic patterns to give you a better understanding of the specific issues that your organization needs to consider. Your design could include a brief overview of the topology plan, network maps showing the data path, routing diagrams, and may contain an analysis of the benefits and drawbacks for that option.
So here we are in the Microsoft Exchange Server Performance Lab, and we're looking at the results from some testing we've been doing on number of users per server. This is really the essence of the question of how many users I can get on a particular Microsoft Exchange server. The tool we use to gather this type of information is something we call the Microsoft Exchange Load Simulator, or Load Sim. And basically what it allows you to do is simulate potentially multiple hundreds of clients on a single machine so that you can basically get this relationship between number of users placing load on the machine and the response time without having hundreds of physical machines. So it's really a great tool that lets you really get a handle on simulating what you think the behavior of your system will be under load.
Once you're satisfied the design will meet your messaging requirements, you should determine an implementation strategy. Create a rollout plan outlining the steps and procedures that you'll follow to implement your new messaging organization. It's often best to implement your system in a staggered fashion. You may also need to consider a plan for migrating users from existing systems to Microsoft Exchange. Migration is the process of moving mailboxes and data from an existing system to Microsoft Exchange. Planning your migration strategy is critical to ensure a smooth transition to Microsoft Exchange and avoid data loss or the disruption of services. Here's Will Sherman to discuss migration.
There are several decisions you'll need to make concerning your migration strategy. The most obvious are who, what, when, and how to migrate. One of the key issues is determining what level of migration is appropriate. You'll first need to determine whether or not you'll need to coexist with the existing system. Once you've determined that, you'll need to determine how much data you wish to bring across for users. Exchange server migration tools allow you to filter information so you can bring across only the information that you feel is important to your users.
There are three options for migration: coexistence with another mail system, migrating mailboxes and their contents, or migrating mailboxes without data. Coexistence enables users on both systems to exchange mail. It involves establishing connectivity between the systems and some means of exchanging directory information. Migrating existing mailboxes involves copying the mailbox and its contents from the existing system to a Microsoft Exchange server mailbox. You can create new Microsoft Exchange mailboxes without data. Only user account information is copied from the existing mailbox. This is the fastest way to switch to Microsoft Exchange if you don't care about retrieving data from the old system. It also allows you to create test accounts using mailboxes with no information. You can migrate from the following mail systems. Microsoft Exchange includes tools for some systems. Others are available from third-party sources.
Extraction tools connect to your existing systems and allow you to selectively copy information. Information falls into major categories: mail message information, schedule information, personal address book information, and mailbox creation information. This information can be imported into Microsoft Exchange Server using the Migration Wizard or the Administration Program. Let's take a look at the Administration Program now. Under the Tools menu, you can bulk import or export information about Exchange accounts, or you can extract account information from Windows NT or NetWare to create Microsoft Exchange accounts. Let's now take a look at the Migration Wizard. We'll now import some information we've previously extracted on a particular user. First, we select the Import Migration Files option. We specify the files that we want to import, in this case the migrator packing list file. We specify which server we're going to import the information into. Choose a recipients container where that users may be created. Determine whether or not we will create NT accounts, and then start migrating the data. Now you can see for this particular user, as mail is being migrated and being populated into the user's accounts. We can also see here that folders are being created for that user. Messages are being brought across, read status and unread status is being preserved. Determined also as migrating attachments. We'll open up a particular message and take a look at a message with attachments. Nope, it's still migrating the data. And open up a particular message. And you see it's been migrated with attachments.
Once you have carefully planned your organization topology, setup is easy. Here's a brief overview of the process.
The setup program installs and starts the necessary services for an Exchange server. For example, the system attendant, the MTA, and the information store. Additionally, if required, it will also install optional components such as the mail connector or directory synchronization agent. During the installation, the administrator will need to provide some basic information so setup can complete its task. Let's take a look at some of that information now. For example, during the install, you'll need to tell your server if it's a new server in a site or if it's going to join an existing site. If it's to join an existing site, you'll need to provide the name of at least one server in that site. You only need to provide the name, and the rest of the information will be gathered from that server. If you're creating a new site, as we'll do now, you'll need to provide the organization and the site name. In our example, we'll use the organization name Volcano Coffee Company. We simply enter that in the organization name field and then go on to the site name field. This site we're going to be the first server in, so we'll install into the North America site name. We simply enter that there and click on the OK button. Exchange verifies that we want to create a new site by presenting this dialog. In this particular case, we do want to, so we'll go ahead and click Yes. You'll need to specify the site services account to reflect which Windows NT account Microsoft Exchange runs under. Using this screen, we'll select a previously created account called Services, and you'll also need to provide it the appropriate password for that account. Once you provide that information, it will be written into Microsoft Exchange, and each server within the site will use that to communicate with each other. So that's basically it. After you provide setup with the information it needs, it copies over the files from the CD and configures the service as requested. Now all that's left to do is simply administer your server.
In this section, we'll show you the key features of the administrator program and cover some of the administrative issues involved in configuring and managing the server. As you've seen, the administrator program allows you to control Microsoft Exchange Server from a single location. In order to run the administrator program, you need to have specific administrative permissions on the system. Several different administrator roles can be assigned to provide administrative flexibility and limit a given administrator's permissions to a single site or even a single server. Here to give you a brief tour of the administrator program is Elaine Sharp.
We spent a lot of time with our customers researching the functionality that we needed to deliver in a truly enterprise-wide messaging system. And we're very excited about the functionality that we have today in the administration program for Microsoft Exchange Server. We are enabling our customers to run either a highly centralized operation with single-seat administration or operate at the decentralized level. So let's take a closer look at that admin program. We're looking at the opening screen of the administration program. Here we have an organization called Volcano Coffee and two different sites within that organization, Europe, Africa, and North America. If we open up the North American site, we can see the various components that are contained here. These are called containers. Within these containers, we have the three main objects that are available within the system. We have objects for managing end users, and objects for connectivity, and objects for monitoring the health of the system. These objects are the building blocks of the administration program. There are four end-user objects in Microsoft Exchange Server. The mailboxes, which is normal users on the Exchange Server. The distribution list, which is a combination of users that can be mailed at the same time. Custom recipients, that are mailboxes from other mail systems that have been included in the address book of Exchange Server. And the public folders, which is the groupware aspect. All these four objects are managed in exactly the same way. Here on the mailbox, we see a series of tabs. Each tab represents a property page. The property pages are places where the administrator can add various functionality to each individual user. Looking at the permissions property page, we see it is possible to add other NT accounts to have levels of access permissions to this mailbox. If we move to the distribution list property page, we can see how easy it is to add a user onto a new distribution list. Adding and deleting users from distribution lists is one of the highest overhead costs in LAN-based messaging today. The Microsoft Exchange Administration Program enables administrators to allocate that task to a member of the distribution list. This task can now be done from the client, therefore significantly reducing the cost of managing this feature. Let's take a closer look at a mailbox. You can see here the various fundamental details of this mailbox, and we can move through and look at various other options, such as here, this mailbox is a member of this distribution list. Here we have the various other addresses that are linked with this mailbox. We have an address for Microsoft Mail, an address for SMTP, an address for X400. And those are the key attributes of this mailbox property sheet. These attributes are the same whether we're looking at a mailbox on the Exchange system or a mailbox that belongs to another mail system. Here we're looking at a mailbox that is on a different mail system, but is also included in the messaging list. Other advanced tasks are found in the Tools menu. Moving mailboxes is an important feature. Here we have the ability to move mailboxes from one server to another quickly and easily by just clicking on the server that we wish to move the mailbox to. Cleaning out mailboxes is also very straightforward. Here we have a selection criteria for removing unnecessary storage from a mailbox. This can be done on a per-user basis. Another level of control that we have over an end user is in the Advanced property sheet. Here we can set size limits on the messages that can be sent out from an end user and the messages that can be received. Again, this can be done on a per-user basis. We can also set storage limits. If a user exceeds the storage limit, a warning notification is automatically sent to the end user. The end users will still be able to receive mail, but will be prohibited from sending mail until their storage has been reduced. The administrator can place similar control over public folders. Let's take a look at the public folder Internet News. If we go into the Advanced property page, we can see the administrator has an option to set a public folder store size limit. If this size limit is exercised, the owner of the folder will be alerted when the message size has been exceeded. However, users of the folder will not be affected. Let's move now to looking at configuring components. Here we can see that management of connectivity is all done in a central place. Let's take a look at how directory replication works. Here in the directory replication object, we can see how we can schedule directory replication between two sites. This is completely configurable. If we look at the schedule property page, we can see how we can set replication for never, for always, or by using the calendar below at selected times. We have the same options available in public folder replication. Let's take a look at the replication schedule on a public folder object. As we can see, it's the identical property page to the directory replication, where we can use the existing information store schedule, configure for never, always, or by using the calendar below, configure for selected times. Public folder replication enables the groupware functionality of Microsoft Exchange to be available for all end users throughout the system. We've taken a look at managing end user objects and managing connectivity. Now let's take a look at the true cost of ownership for an enterprise messaging system, keeping your system up and running, monitoring the health of your system. We offer a range of utilities that enable you to check on what's happening on your system. The first of these is the server monitor. A server monitor is used to monitor the state of servers within a site. For a selected server, you can specify which servers to monitor and schedule how often the monitor is run. Monitors can automatically verify if the services are running and can be triggered to send out various notification alerts depending on the problem level of severity. If we look at the notification property page, we can see we have a number of options. Here we've set up an escalation procedure that starts with 15 minutes and a mail message sent to a specified person. After 20 minutes we have a Windows NT alert going to somebody else, and after 45 minutes we're going to launch a process. We can also set up an escalation process for automatic action when a server is stopped. At the first attempt we can choose to take no action. The second attempt we can restart the service, and at the subsequent attempt we can restart the computer with an automatic restart message. We have similar functionality available for the link monitor, which enables you to monitor the link between two servers and make sure that that route is still available to you. By monitoring the delivery time for a test message between two servers, the link monitor checks that the connection is running smoothly. A more immediate way of monitoring the system is to quite simply look at the queues on the MTA, where you can clearly see how many messages you have left to deliver. Microsoft Exchange Server also takes advantage of the utilities that are already available in Windows NT Server. A good example is the Performance Monitor. Performance Monitor can be configured to track the performance and activity of any Microsoft Exchange Server component. It will display performance statistics that indicate such things as queue activity, processor utilization, memory usage, and server throughput. We also have the event viewer. The event viewer keeps a log of all events that are happening in Microsoft Exchange Server. This enables us to quickly identify if there are any errors occurring in the system. The final piece of functionality we would like to show you is probably one of the most critical. Microsoft Exchange Server includes an enhanced version of the Windows NT backup application. This functionality enables you to carry on using your servers while recording transactions and therefore providing an online backup. This online backup records both the transactions of the information store and the directory, which means that you always have a backup available of everything that has occurred during the day on your enterprise messaging system. So we've shown you how easy it is to manage end-user objects, the rich range of connectivity options available to you, and the utilities that we give you for managing the health of your system. We've worked really hard on this functionality and we're proud of what we've achieved, so we hope you will agree that the Microsoft Exchange Server Administration Program represents a major step forward in technology and truly provides the tools for managing an enterprise-wide messaging system.
With a product as powerful and flexible as Microsoft Exchange Server, it's difficult to convey all of its features and functionality. But by providing an overview of the major components and concepts involved with messaging, hopefully we've given you a start in the right direction towards planning your Microsoft Exchange Server system. The various documentation included with Microsoft Exchange Server contains detailed information and covers all you'll need to carry out your planning. We'd like to end by offering you the perspective and experience of several people who've had the opportunity to plan and implement a Microsoft Exchange Server organization. This includes people from various companies that participated in beta testing and who are early adopters of the product, as well as those responsible for setting up the Microsoft Exchange Server messaging system right here at Microsoft.
If there's one thing that I would have to stress is that when designing your Exchange topology or your Exchange environment, do not underestimate the complexity of a messaging system.
And what I can't emphasize enough is the amount of planning that you need to put into have a successful Exchange rollout. Planning from your site infrastructure, laying out your topologies based on whether it's geographic or organizational, and understanding who needs to send mail to who and who needs to share what information. And along with that, you need to also take into account your security model and how Exchange will integrate with NT. I believe successfully planning the two together will ease the rollout of Exchange in your organizations.
Our initial implementation of Exchange included a topology spanning several Exchange sites, but we found that our network bandwidth between our sites was more than adequate for including all of the Exchange servers within the same site. And this realized some other benefits, including better manageability. We come from a culture that has approximately 50% of portable users, notebook users, and we found that it was very easy to move accounts between servers when the single site topology was used.
One of the most important things you've got to decide early is how you're going to set up your display names in the global address book. At a university campus, we've got different groups of people setting up each of the different sites, and they each set it up differently, so we had the global address list being a mixture of first name, last name, and last name, comma, first name. We spent a great deal of time trying to decide how to work this out, and the way that the Exchange search engine works made the decision for us, and we've chosen to use first name, last name. The reason being is that when a user types in a name and does a check name, it's like if they're looking for a person named Terry Wilson and they just type in Terry, Exchange will look in the display name field and find Terry, or if they had typed in Wilson, it will not find it in the display name field, but it would find it in the last name field. Or you can type in, if you happen to know that their logon account is Terry W, it would actually find it in the alias field.
One of the key challenges in operating an Internet Mail Connector site is the need to interoperate with so many different computer systems. A little bit of prior planning can go a long way to making that easier to do. One of the first things you'll find you need to do is contact your network service provider or your information services officer in order to have DNS records added to the domain name service. These DNS records make it possible for other computers to find your Internet Mail Connector system. When you're ready to run the Internet Mail Connector, there are two required fields that you'll need to fill in the admin application. The first is the Postmaster Notification Mailbox. This is a mailbox to which the Internet Mail Connector will deliver reports of mail which could not be delivered or for one reason or another failed in delivery attempts. The other required field is the address space field. This tells the IMC which address types to route through to the Internet. There are several other optional fields that you may wish to fill in the admin, and these are things like MIME options, per domain delivery options, and other things that make it easier to interoperate with the many different types of computers out on the Internet. When things don't run exactly like you had planned, use the event log, performance counters, protocol logging, and even link monitoring in order to determine what went wrong and what you can do to fix it. All of these things will make operating the Internet Mail Connector much easier.
There are really two general approaches to doing migrations. One would be more of a trickle migration where small groups of users were moved on a nightly basis, and the other would be more of a bulk migration where an entire post office is migrated at once. Exchange gives you both migration options, but no one can tell you how to best move your users. So what I would say is it's extremely important to understand your user populations and their needs and then adopt the migration approach that makes most sense for you.
I would recommend the appropriate training for all parts of the organization, from the desktop organizations down through the server organizations, because of the size of the Exchange product. I think everybody really needs to at least have a general understanding of the product and then go into more detail in their specific areas.
Having a strict change control process in place is very, very important, particularly with Exchange. We maintain logs of all changes made to all of our Exchange servers, which are then QA'd on a weekly basis to ensure that any changes made to the server are properly authorized, and then if we get into a situation where we need to troubleshoot a problem, we can trace back what changes were made to a given server to help us quickly resolve it. Change control is absolutely critical to keeping a healthy Exchange server running.
Microsoft Exchange Server provides an extension to the Windows NT backup system so that administrators can back up their Exchange servers online while their users are actually logged on, still processing their mail. This is particularly important because the Exchange server writes transaction log files, and when you do a backup, it actually purges those log files from the Exchange server, freeing up a lot of your disk space. The other important reason is if there's a hardware failure, you'll have up-to-date backups to restore from. When you do a restore, the log files that are written are actually used to bring your server up to a completely valid state right before the failure happened. Another key component is actually validating your backups by doing an alternate server restore. And by restoring your data to a second server, you can actually make sure all the mailboxes were backed up properly. Speaking to a lot of customers, the common scenario is where they do full backups on a weekend and do incremental backups during the week. This ensures that they have a recoverable system in case the system ever does happen to fail.
Fortunately, Exchange gives us the ability to have granular administrative rights. We can give certain people the administration rights to monitor or administrate the recipients, or we can give people more rights to administrate site connectors and X400 connectors or monitors. This gives us the ability to not put all our eggs in one basket with administration, and the appropriate people will be able to do the appropriate jobs they need to do.
We have several users that subscribe to mailing lists on the internet that they like to share with other people, and they found it was convenient to set up an inbox assistant to forward these messages to public folders. But unfortunately, when these users were away from their desk or on vacation, those public folders didn't receive the new mail. So we found that by setting up an SMTP proxy on the public folder itself and subscribing that address to the mailing list, the information would get continuously updated automatically.
One of the first projects we created was a paging gateway. We're on a university campus with many doctors in the medical school. We needed an easy way to be able to page them. The address book contains all of the paging information that we needed. All we needed was a program to actually do the paging. As it stands now, any of the users on campus can send a page to any of the doctors. The We use the delivery restrictions that are set up on each of the different doctors to be able to determine who can page them, and it's working great.
We've leveraged Microsoft Exchange to provide the final phase of our enterprise information system. Its roots are in Microsoft SQL Server, where the data repository is, and we've built a client query tool based on Visual Basic and Microsoft Excel VBA. And then what we do is we take the charts and the pivot tables that the analysts have created using those tools, and we deliver them to the users via Microsoft Exchange.